will be going through, sealers in general, but obviously this is very much focused on bioceramics and their obturation. So a little bit about me first. I am from Birmingham. I graduated from King's in 2012. I finished my MSc also from King's in 2018. Also in 2018, I moved to New Zealand, and since 2019, I have been limited to endodontics. So just a little bit about me first. We really enjoy the lifestyle that we have here in New Zealand. This is my wife on a hike this was actually on Christmas Day.
Wow,
so it's nice and
amazing.
quiet. Yeah, we had a great. You don't normally get it this clear. So yeah, it was a very nice time. This is my daughter in the backpack at the end of the walk. She's having a great time. And this is our little dog named Chewy. So first of all, the aim of obturation. Why do we obturate in the first place? So we've known for quite a long time that we can't remove all the microorganisms from a tooth, and pictures like this sort of really explain why. So this is a micro CT scan of a few different teeth. These are taken at different ages, and you'll see on the right hand side, even this, I think this lady was about 70 years old. So even in these elderly people where you do often get sclerosed canals, there's going to sometimes be a lot of difficult anatomy to fill. This is a scanning electron microscope, and you'll see over here on the dentinal tubules, you get bacteria which can penetrate quite deep into these tubules, making it very difficult for us to reach them with some of our irrigants. You also get something called an apical delta, which is present in about anywhere between 10 and 20% of teeth, depending on a tooth type and ethnicity. And again, you'll just see that it is very, very difficult to fill these well. So the whole aim of obturation is to make sure that anything that we can't reach stays there. So we want to try and entomb these bacteria within the root canal system, and obviously nothing new gets into the root canal as well. So how do we do this? Well, very simply, we just use GP and sealer. GP's been around for a very long time, and other things have sort of come and gone, silver points and Resilon and things like that, but GP is likely here to stay. And sealer, there are a few different types. So we'll go through that first. So first, you get zinc oxide eugenol. So these have been around for a very long time. They're things like bulk canal sealer, Tubby seal, Grossman sealer, Roth sealer. Very popular, maybe 10, 20 years ago. They are antibacterial. They are quite cheap. And because they've been around for a very long time, people know that, they can work. The downside to these are that they are cytotoxic, so if you do extrude quite a lot, the patient is going to be in pain. And I have seen sort of rare cases where they've extruded so much that we've had to go in surgically to try and remove some of that sealer. Yeah. It does shrink on setting. It is soluble, and the mechanical properties are not the best. Next, we've got calcium hydroxide. I don't think many people use these. They are called Apex and Sealapex. So they are antibacterial, but again, they are soluble. And when they were developed, there was that sort of desired antibacterial and therapeutic effect was just not quite seen. So these didn't really take hold. Finally, you've got your resin sealers. I guess these are, some of the most popular around, including AH+. So these are very flowable. They definitely are antibacterial. They've got good radiopacity, and they can be retreated in that you can use some solvents to remove them if needed. The downside to these type of sealers is that they do shrink on setting anywhere between 2 and 6%. They are resorbable, which sometimes is not really a bad thing. They are hydrophobic and initially cytotoxic. So if you do extrude quite a lot, your patient is likely to have some post-op pain, but they do say it dies down after about a week or so. So with the GP, there's a few different ways of getting that GP into the canal. First is called lateral compaction, or just your single tapered cone. So this is very easy. You don't really need any of, they say expensive equipment, but it's really not that expensive. But again, it's very easy. But the apical seal is not as great compared to some other techniques. So if you saw that sort of apical delta picture at the start, if you sort of imagine just placing a single cone into that tooth, you're not going to, capture all that anatomy that easy. And in particularly large or oval canals, it can take some time. So your spreader ideally should be there for about 20 seconds each time in order to actually create that space inside the canal. You've then got warm vertical compaction. So this is essentially where you aim to get your plugger about 5 millimeters from the apex. And this is what pushes that sealer and the GP into all these areas which are difficult to reach otherwise. So this has really been the gold standard for a number of years because it does provide a true 3D obturation. And anything that new that we study is always studied against warm vertical compaction to see how good it is. The downsides of this are it is quite technique sensitive. It does take time to learn how to do well. It can, when you are doing it well, it does take a bit of time, and ideally you do need good magnification. You want to be seeing where your heater is going up to, and ideally where your backfill is coming up to as well. If it's done incorrectly, it can lead to some root damage. So the temperatures from these downpacks are quite high, up to 200 degrees. Ideally, you should only be having that heater heated inside the canal for no more than 2-3 seconds. And I have seen people do it for much, much longer than that. So ideally, to get your plugger 5 mils from the apex, we traditionally would use these large tapered preps. And what that sort of means is, so these are some sort of more traditional, not traditional, it's more popular root canal files. And these numbers are basically I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but the maximum cutting diameter of these files, are over 100 mils, 120 mils here. And if you compare that to something with a constant 4% taper, you'll see that you can now be much more conservative in your preps. And if we look at that 3504, you've got, a good apical diameter being relatively conservative compared to some of these other files coronally. So the reason that we would do warm vertical compaction, or the reason that it was the gold standard for a number of years, is to overcome the shortcomings of the sealers that were available to us at the time. So your zinc oxide usional and resin sealers did shrink, and so really that was a big reason why ideally we would need to compact them, and instead of using a single 2% tapered cone and filling the canal with sealer, ideally we wanted a lot more GP there than our sealers. So when you're using your heated pluggers, ideally you need straight line access. You don't want to be bending these pluggers. They're going to sort of break and get damaged very easily. And in severely curved canals, this is very, very difficult and sometimes near impossible to get your plugger 5 mils from the apex. So this was a case that I was sort of following up. So this is very sort of typical of what I would say something that I would do maybe 5 years ago, where I'd quite often finish on a pro taper. Sometimes I'd use gold or wave one gold, medium. I think this was to pro taper X3. Again, I wouldn't say there's anything particularly wrong with this root canal. But if you can, so there's just another one. This was a video I was looking at on YouTube, and this was actually done by Cliff Ruddle. And again, I think he's gone up to a F3 as well. And you'll see, particularly on the distals, it's quite a large prep. But again, it's a fantastic root canal, nothing really wrong with it. But again, the access is taken off quite a lot.
Mine looks like a piece of shit compared to this, and I'll probably spend 6 times longer on it.
I think it's like when you look at like the amount of tooth structure that's removed, I think but now I think we're lucky that the materials we have with the kind of heat treated nitrile, it allows us to be a lot more conservative. I think
for sure.
One of the issues traditionally with the instruments that we had is that they were so stiff that in order to get around the apical curves, we had to be a lot more aggressive with the amount of tooth structure we kind of removed. So it was kind of a balance
with those stiffer files. You only really want the bending once, so you definitely needed your straight line access. So if you then compare it to something more recent, so you can see on these mesials it's much more conservative. There's actually 2 distals there, so it looks like a wider prep, but again, they were very skinny preps, and this lecture would be quite useless if this treatment didn't work. So thankfully, at the follow-up, it has all healed, and you'll see that in comparison to that first one, which I would have done a few years back, we've achieved the same result, being much more conservative.
Exactly, yeah. So it's more, I think when we look long term, it's like often what happens with teeth is that they end up cracking. So if we can reduce our kind of footprint on the tooth as much as we possibly can from the start, if you like 10, 12, 15 years later, if failures by cracking the tooth is lost, we can't do anything about it. Whereas even if there's a failure down the line, we can sometimes do a selective retreatment, or we can do, but my feeling is I don't think the outcomes in terms of the endo would be different, but the amount of tooth we can preserve is massively different.
For sure, yeah. So carrier-based obturation. So this was sort of marketed as obtaining a endodontist quality obturation without all the hassle of these pluggers and backfills, making it potentially much easier for the general dentist to achieve this type of obturation. Again, you needed quite a well-tapered prep. There was always a risk of overfilling and underfilling with your extrusion of the carrier, sometimes sealer, sometimes extrusion of the GP. The thing I've seen quite a lot when I have retreated these is the in curvatures, the GP does and can separate from your carrier. So often you don't get any GP at all apically. And these can be harder to retreat if your carrier does not come out in one piece. It does make quite a mess. And actually, these are very expensive. I've never used them myself, but when I was looking at the price, I was quite, this is in New Zealand dollars. But yeah, they're much more expensive than a normal GP cone. So finally, we move on to bioceramics. So bioceramics is a ceramic material which was designed for dental use. So you get 2 types. You've got your bio-inert, which is zirconia or alumina. So your zirconia crowns are technically bioceramic materials. And then you got bioactive, and this is what we sort of deal with in endodontics. So these would be your calcium silicate or calcium phosphate cements. So the first bioceramic was MTA. So this was sold as ProRoot MTA. So it was a fantastic material at its time, very capable, but it did have some limitations. So initially, it did discolor the tooth. So even when they changed the formulation to white MTA, that also did discolor the tooth. So this was just a sort of comparison between MTA over here. You get quite significant discoloration after, I think this was 4 months, compared to one of the newer materials over here. So, ideally, we try and avoid using it a lot in the anterior region if possible. It didn't flow very well. It's difficult to handle, very difficult to mix. Well, I found it difficult to mix anyway. And they found out much later on that it was bismuth oxide, which they use as their radiopacifier, and that's what caused the staining. So once their patent expired, there was a lot of different products. So this was actually from, I think, 2016. And so nearly or most companies sort of took their turn at making either some sort of MTA based sealer or a new MTA. So the more popular of these were at the few years back the Endosequence BC sealer or the Total Fill, depending on. So these are made by the same manufacturer, just marketed and sold by different companies. So not a very scientific term, but this is what I sort of considered the first gen bioceramic sealers. So from MTA, they removed any impurities, they removed the bismuth oxide, they made the particle size smaller and tried to turn it into a sealer. These were very expensive. And again, being a new material and being anything endo-based, it's always expensive. They weren't as radiopaque as people wanted them to be. So compared to sometimes AH+, they weren't as radiopaque, and that actually put some people off. They couldn't be heated, so there was no downpack. And actually, when you're moving from warm vertical condensation, getting that plugger 5 mils from the apex to something which can't be heated, it's quite a change, and a lot of people sort of didn't take to that either. There were some reported long setting times, and they always came with these tips which were wasted quite a lot of material. They then developed this Endosequence high flow. So these did come with these minimal waste tips, but they had to be bought separately. And then a Endosequence BC Putty. So the ones that I've been using now for maybe over a year or a year and a half now is the One-Fil Bioceramic Sealer. This is most comparable to the Endosequence high flow, I'd say, and also the Bioceramic Putty as well. So the One-Fil comes with 2 different types of tips. So you've got these metal ones which can be bent quite easy, and also the plastic ones which are pre-bent, making it much easier to get into the canals compared to the straight ones from the Endosequence. So again, not a very widely used term, but something that I call the second generation of bioceramic sealers. So these are much more radiopaque. Do look, subjectively, look a lot better on a post-up. They are very, very flowable, and it does take time to get used to this. They can be heated. It's not sort of advisable to heat them 5 mils from the apex. It's not really needed so much, but a few mils of downpack, it can be done. But apart from One-Fil, these are all now much more expensive than their first generation ones. But thankfully, we do have One-Fil at a much more reasonable cost. So you do have to be careful if you are switching to bioceramics, because some sealers are marketed, as bioceramic sealers, but a lot of them are sort of bioceramic and resin based, with only maybe 10-15% bioceramic. So the hope was back then to get the best of both, and unfortunately it didn't quite turn out like that. So the bioceramic sealers, they are very biocompatible. I definitely wouldn't say there's no issues with extrusion, but there are certainly very minimal reduced post-op pain for sure with the extrusion of just the sealer alone. So this was a study that they did. I think there was about, this was all by endodontists who I think new to using the bioceramic sealer, and what they found was, I think they did about 300 teeth here, in about almost 50% of cases that they would extrude that sealer, but what they found that it had no significant effect on the outcome. But what that really means is the extrusion of just a bioceramic sealer is not the issue. Extrusion often comes with the loss of your apical constriction, generally due to your incorrect working length. So what that means is you tend to over prep the canal. You do get extrusion of bacteria, your debris, your irrigants, and that's what leads to the post-op pain. If you're extruding just your sealer, that alone, or actually if you're extruding just a bioceramic sealer, that alone will not cause many issues. So this was a case I think that Daniel posted on the Facebook group. you'll see here where they've likely just injected that sealer, possibly even locked the tip into the canal, and extruded quite a lot. But thankfully, it didn't make too much difference, and that lesion, this big lesion over here, has healed. And when you do get big lesions like this, it is quite often you will get some resorption at the apex, and it's very common to lose your apical constriction due to that resorption. So you do have to be quite careful with your working length control on these larger radiolucencies. So they are antibacterial. They do produce calcium hydroxide on setting. I think One-Fil is the manufacturers say has a pH of about 13. But I guess what my take on this is that is not something that you would rely on. Your cleaning, shaping, and irrigation is really what's doing all the work. You're not sort of getting a 10K file, putting some bioceramic sealer and hoping that it will heal these big lesions. This is more of a bonus for me. It's dimensionally stable, so it doesn't shrink at all. In fact, there is a very minimal expansion, but the main thing is here it's no shrinkage. I was meant to change this to minimal resorption. Sometimes they don't resorb at all, but there is very minimal resorption. So what this sort of looks like is, this is a case I did with AH plus, and I think we've possibly got quite a large lateral canal in this area. But when I followed it up, all that sealer had resorbed. And in a case like this, it's not making too much difference. But there were, so this was a case actually that I saw in a lecture which was given at the American Association of Endodontics meeting. So again, the guy's done a warm vertical, picked up some nice anatomy over there, and at his follow-up again, that apical delta, or the sealer which was pushed into that area, has resorbed over time. And again, on a case like this, it's made no difference. The tooth is still asymptomatic, but there are cases where I feel like it would make a difference having a resorbable sealer. And that's in cases where you've got pre-existing lesions. So there's going to be a lot of bacteria in these areas which are difficult to reach, difficult to clean. And again, so where you've picked up that lateral canal with the sealer, where it does get resorbed over time, it sort of opens that area back up. And then again, you've got at the follow-up, there was a lesion which would develop here. And again, some sealer resorption in these areas. So this was the case that I did with the bioceramic sealer. It was referred because the dentist had trouble getting into that distal canal. It was actually incredibly close to causing perforation. So again, we've got relatively skinny prep on the mesials. And again, so we've got a nice lateral anatomy filled in line with the radiolucency there on the distal root. And so at the follow-up, thankfully this is all healed well. So a case like this, where obviously I've got no instrumentation into that canal, there's going to be bacteria there because there is a lesion there. Ideally, you would want your sealer to stay there and entomb these bacteria over a long time to make sure that they don't proliferate and cause another lesion again.
Really nice case.
Oh, thank you. Again, where you've got these big existing lesions, there's going to be high bacterial load in these areas, and if you do seal these areas with your sealer, again, ideally you want them to stay that way. And it's a bit fuzzy on the post-op, but again, you'll see this little bit of sealer is still there, and making sure these apical areas are completely sealed the whole time. And I feel like, again, on retreatments, this does make a bit of a difference where, again, very high bacterial load, you've got bacteria which are been known to be difficult to and possibly resistant to your irrigants, your calcium hydroxide, difficult bacteria to kill. So again, you want to entomb these bacteria and make sure they stay that way. And again, we don't ideally, again, the sealer being non-resorbable for me in these type of cases does make a bit of a difference. So these bioceramic sealers are hydrophilic. So hydrophobic sealers, like the resin-based sealers. So dentine is about 24% water by weight. So what this means is, and to be honest, I really only sort of noticed this when I started using a microscope. And I wouldn't say this happens every time, but it definitely does happen sometimes, where if you just place that cone into the canal, sometimes you're not likely to get a lot of sealer into the actual tooth. It does take a bit of effort sometimes to get your resin-based sealers into the canals. And I think if you are using a resin-based sealer, it would be good to sort of try and coat that canal and actually check instead of just placing the cone once to length, which I definitely did, back in my NHS days. But yeah, sometimes it does take a bit of effort to coat that whole canal with your sealer using a resin-based sealer. In more extreme cases, again, it's unlikely to happen every time, but in more extreme cases, possibly if you haven't tried that canal too well, you just won't get any sealer down into those canals at all. And this one, you'll see I actually did put a bit of effort into getting that sealer in, and really there just wasn't much getting down those canals.
No, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And I think it's so rare that people actually mention that, because we see it lots of times in surgery as well, where you look at the radiograph and it looks fantastic. But then when you actually do the surgery, there's just GP with no sealer around it at the top, with loads of leakage all around it. So it's a lot more challenging than people realize to get the actual sealer to length.
Yeah, particularly on curves and things like that. It's like with any sealer, as soon as you touch the wall, most of your sealer's gone onto the onto the canal walls rather than in the actual canal. And yeah, without the microscope, it's unlikely that I would have ever seen this, to be honest.
Yeah. But also the thicker the sealer you use as well, then the more difficult it is to get it to length too as well.
Yes, yeah. So if you compare that to a bioceramic sealer, so actually I only noticed when I was going through this the other day that I haven't really even coated this cone all the way. So you'll see in the mirror just down here, there is still some GP showing. So it's not like I've cheated and I've got a ton of sealer. So compared to a bioceramic sealer, which are hydrophilic, these are much easier to actually get uniform coating of the canal walls. Being hydrophilic, much easier to get this coating. This is probably my favorite property of these sealers, and if it was sort of side by side, this is something that you can see. So you can't see that the sealer doesn't sink. You can't see that it's sort of antibacterial, but they are very, very easy to clean up. So it's just about 10 seconds with a scaler. And I do just fast forward it here a little bit, just so you know, I wasn't cheating. And yeah, just 5-10 seconds with an ultrasonic scaler, and it's very, very easy to clean no sort of alcohol in your brush. And compared to the resin-based sealers, it might save like 20 seconds, but that 20 seconds is it's so easy. And so these bioceramic materials, they are osteoconductive. And so what that sort of translates to is what I've noticed is on many occasions, I do get very quick and very good healing. So these sort of materials actively promote bone growth into the area. So this was a case where I actually treated 4 teeth. So we're looking at the 4-4 all the way to the 4-1. There was radiolucencies on all teeth, quite a lot of bone loss on the CBCT that we took over here. And I think this was just a screenshot of one of the sections of the CBCT. So again, a lot of bone loss. So we treated all of these with a bioceramic sealer. We filled them all with a bioceramic sealer. And at my 6 months review, we've got almost complete healing of all these areas, and all that bone has grown back, and it is good to see these type of cases healing this fast, actually. So a few more cases where I've just had some decent healing. So again, it's a bit fuzzy here, but it's a relatively skinny prep, quite a large lesion. You've got some distal bone loss as well. I did tell them to take the that 2-8 out. Thankfully, they did listen to me. And at the follow-up, we've got, you know, good healing. All the distal bone has come back again. And again, it's a relatively skinny prep. Haven't needed to go too wide. And with these bioceramic sealers, again, you can get a very nice result, being as conservative as possible. Again, just another case with quite a big distal lesion here. And this is a case where, again, so not every single time will I go, you know, very conservative, very skinny. It really is case dependent. These canals were a bit wider. Felt it was best to go this was actually just a constant 6% taper instead. And again, with a bioceramic sealer at my 6 months, we've got good, not complete healing, but very good healing. So now I think I'd be happy for them to go for a crown on this one. Osteoconductive. So you do get very good strength, bond strength to the dentine with these sealers, and it has been shown to improve fracture strength and coronal leakage. So there's not very many studies on this, but I did find the one where when they compared it to, these are on extracted teeth, so when they compared it to no RCT compared to the bioceramic sealers and bioceramic coated GP cones, you do get similar fracture resistance compared to the standard cones. But again, this is on fractured teeth. Fracture resistance in the mouth, that there's very there's a lot of different factors involved, and whether, you know, how well this you know, translates to teeth in the mouth is always difficult to know, but you know, the results are promising for sure. So yeah, these are your bioceramic you know, impregnated and sometimes coated GP cones, and yeah, I feel like these do help to get that sort of bonding to the GP and to the canal walls as well with your bioceramic sealers. So obturation techniques with a bioceramic sealer. So how, if you are looking to switch and start using these, there's a few ways which you can. So the same first would be the, you know, just the same as you would with your resin-based sealer. You can coat your GP cones with the sealer. You do get obviously less wastage with this. I sometimes use this in teeth where there's very easy access, you know, so possibly there's the dentist has gone in and you know, made a relatively wide opening, so it's very easy not to touch the canal walls. I don't suppose there's many people who are interested in using bioceramic sealer on the NHS, but if there are, I would say, you know, this is probably not a bad way to go. If you're going to just switch from your resin sealer to this is I'd say it's definitely viable for the NHS. So again, this is it was a very carious tooth, so we had a very wide open access here. So I did choose to do this just with a sealer coated on the GP cone. So you'll see over here, I just sort of place it to length, and I do just go in and check that it's actually coated the walls. So to spread that sealer down the canals, I'll just sort of pump the GP into the canal a few times. Again, check that it's coating the walls well, and just place that to length. So with my heater, I've only gone in 1, maybe 2 mils into that canal. Just a bit of that gentle damp pack. You don't really need to be doing anything too vigorous there. Same in the distal here, just a bit of probably 3-4 times pressing that sealer into the apical regions of that canal. Again, very easy to clean up over here as well. And this was the result that we got. So again, for that palatal, I'd only just you know, pump that GP into the canal quite a few times, and then we have got, you know, some nice anatomy picked up on the palatal there. This is actually a very good case for showing the importance of, you know, your apex locator compared to your master cone. So to be honest, I did get an apex locator reading, but I did ledge this canal with when I tried to go up a size, I think to my 2504, I did create a ledge. So I wasn't able to actually get that GP into that area. And so that this lateral area, it's just all the bioceramic sealer, but I was able to clean it with a 2004. But again, thankfully, we've got some good healing at my review.
That's
So
lovely.
yeah, so it was really,
We did a course last week, and everybody was using Cole's cold lateral condensation, and it's just in terms of workflow, in terms of like, you can see how quickly, like your obturation there in the canals is literally taking what, 15 seconds per canal.
oh yeah, of course, yeah, it's nothing.
And the results you're able to achieve with such a kind of simple, quick technique, it'd be very difficult to get the sealer to flow if you're trying to use cold lateral condensation. Not to mention all the
Yes.
pressure that goes on the root, especially if you've got delicate roots. If you're trying to get pluggers really deep down, it's technically, I've always found cold lateral condensation technically a really, really difficult technique to do.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I've not seen it, but I have heard cases where, you know, they've fractured the tooth trying to get your spreader, you know, deep into these canals. So yeah, coating that GP cone, it's a very simple, easy way. And you know, I'd be quite interested to hear other people's opinions, because like this is sort of the way that when I started using the sealer, this is probably what I did first, just to get used to it. And then I sort of moved on to injecting it. So initially I would just use these shorter tips. So this is, which I'll show you in a second, just an edge tip, which I used first. So I would advise these to use, you know, a shorter tip when you're getting used to the flow of the sealer. You'll see that some of these new sealers, like One-Fil and even the high flow, they're much more flowable than you would expect them to be. So you get, you know, it's less risk of extrusion when you're using these type of tips, but sometimes you don't often get as much sealer into the actual canals as you think you might would with the injection. So again, just another sort of a typical molar case. So this is just an edge tip which I use as well. So I bent that at 90 degrees. It's gone into the MB, coming out the MB2 here. And again, I'll inject that sort of, it only really goes 1 or 2 mils into the actual canal. You get a bit of excess into the syringe tip there. And again, you just sort of pump it into spread that sealer apically. Again, very little down pack here. You don't need to be going, you know, 5 mils from the apex. Very easy, much easier than trying to get your plugger that deep into the canal. And again, just extremely easy to clean these teeth. So again, that's the post-op. Nothing remarkable here, but yeah, it's a very easy. Now it does save a bit of time obturating the teeth this way compared to, you know, some of your other techniques. So you get long tips, like I showed you initially. You get 2 type of long tips: the silver ones and the purple ones with the metal tip, or your plastic ones. So I do often use these in when I'm trying to be conservative, you know, in difficult to fill anatomies. So with this, it's very important that when you're trying to get that sealer into the, you know, it should only still need to be the coronal third. You're not aiming to inject it all the way to the apical areas. That don't lock your tip into the canal, and ideally have the sealer. So start pressing the sealer, have it ready at the tip before you place it into the canal. So you know that as soon as you're pressing as soon as you're injecting your sealer, the sealer's already there. So this was actually a case where, again, you'll see on the post-op. So I'll just go through it first. On the distal, I do actually lock the tip into the canal. Again, this was a canal that it wasn't patent. There was a lesion. I should have posted the pre-op, but it wasn't patent, and it wasn't, and there was a radiolucency. So you'll see on the distal canal, I do lock that tip into the canal. So these are just the mesials here. So I actually do lock that tip in. And with the distal, I actually do a little bit of down pack over here. So I'm really trying to get that sealer in because it wasn't patent. You know, probably about 5 mils down pack into that canal. Really trying to get that sealer in, and a bit of backfill here as well. And so again, with the cleanup, sometimes you do just nick that GP there. And again, it's very easy to just sort of condense that back into place. So yeah, you'll see I wasn't able to get patency on that canal. And with that down pack, like that probably is a little bit excessive. But you'll see that again, these sealers they are very flowable. I probably didn't need to do as much as I needed to do. But thankfully we did pick up, and unfortunately I haven't got a follow-up on this case yet. He was meant to come a month or so ago and failed to come back, but hopefully I will get. Sorry.
They normally come back if there is a problem.
Of course, yeah, yeah. So let's see. Actually, I don't often get failed follow-ups. They're normally pretty good, but I was really hoping to see this guy again. But yeah, good news. But let's if when I do get the follow-up, I will post it on the group. So this was one which I'd consider, difficult anatomy to fill. It's through I think a very new Emax crown, so I was being as conservative as I can. We've got 5 canals here, so you'll see the 3 mesials and the 2 distals over here. So on these cases, I definitely will use these the plastic tips. They're much easier to get into these areas, and you'll see it just comes through very nicely. So that's into the middle mesial. It's coming out the the mesial buccal and the mesial lingual. You do get a decent amount of wastage, but sometimes on these type of cases, I don't really mind because I know that I'm getting good amount of sealer into these teeth. And then that's the post up here. So again, even though I have injected the sealer into the canal and I've coated the sealer and placed it all the way to but it's not like we've got excessive extrusion. It doesn't mean that when injecting the sealer you're bound to get a lot of extrusion. And this is a tooth where the dentist is, well, actually I think the prosthodontist is now going to replace that crown. It's again another difficult I think case to fill with with your resin sealer. So this is where I would use again that plastic tip. So that's actually the palatal canal there. That was the distal. And so this is the MB1 and MB2. Again, the sealer flowing really well into the MB2. You'll see I just locked that tip that was by accident into the palatal canal. So this time I've done no sort of pumping at all. I'd already locked the tip into the canal. I knew it was completely filled with sealer. Oh, sorry, never mind. I won't go through that again. So this was the pre-op. I just skipped past the end of that video by accident there. This was the post-op. So again, I'd locked that sealer, locked that tip into the palatal canal. So you do have a bit of extrusion, but again, I'm not overly concerned. These sealers are very, very biocompatible. And again, at the follow-up, very nice healing of this tooth. And again, it was a difficult case. You really need a microscope for that. Relatively curved and still conservative, but we've got good healing on this case. I think maybe just a couple more cases here. This is actually quite an interesting one because you've got that J-shaped lesion. It's heavily broken down. The tooth in front is missing. It sort of very much looks like a fracture, a fractured tooth. And even the main thing with this tooth was the reason that I even decided to go ahead was there was no pocketing. And so I thought, okay, let's give it a go and see what's happening. So we've got our rubber dam on, temp out, caries out. So again, you've got these 2 fracture lines here, one on this mesiolingual wall, one along the distal, and it's not looking good, to be honest. There was a long conversation to be had with the patient about prognosis and things like that, but he was insistent he wanted to save this tooth, so I thought we'd have a go and see how we're doing. So those are the mesials, the distal not looking great. So again, this is actually a very quick, important tip, which I find helps me a lot, is to build up any missing walls before you start your endo. It just keeps the hypochlorite in that pulp chamber as long as possible. And hypochlorite is very good. We want it around as much as for as long as time as possible. And it just stops it, spilling. And even though we're using rubber dam, you don't want hypochlorite spilling everywhere. It does really help. So again, we found the middle mesial. So 3 canals here. Cleaned out the distal. So again, most important thing really here is that that fracture line just over here is not going into the distal root over there. So you know, I'm hoping that we're getting a good result. So this is actually very frustrating because the video went perfectly. It all went. It was really nice. But when I played it back, my microscope was recording. What I could see from a microscope was about a millimeter, or probably a centimeter off.
Feel your pain
From what I was seeing. So when I'm looking at this back, I've just cut all the important bits off. But you have to take my word for it. It all went really well. And it was a beautiful case. And I was really hoping for a nice clean shot of the mesials, and that was the best that I got. And I was really upset watching this back, actually. But so yeah, this was the pre-op again, the post-op, and I told him, so again, the conversation I had was, look, if you're going to commit to saving this tooth, as soon as I'm done, you need to go get a crown. And yes, it might not heal, but that's the risk that you take. And of course, he didn't listen to me. He didn't get the crown, but thankfully it had healed. And to be honest, it's unlikely he's still got the crown now. And this was actually a year ago. So yeah, some people they just don't listen.
Yeah, I mean, what can you can only do is you tell people what to do, and it's totally up to them then to take on their own responsibility. But I mean, that's a beautiful result. I think a lot of people looking at that first image would just say that tooth's for the bin. So amazing work to get that.
Yes, yeah. And to be honest, as soon as I as soon as I got this X-ray, my receptionist was like, she actually said to me, she's very experienced. So she said to me, shall I just tell them extraction? And so when she called the patient, and I said, I'm pretty sure I said yes. So when she called the patient, he was like, no, I really need to save this tooth. So then I saw her for a consultation. So yeah, this is definitely one that, I mean, I don't think many people would look at this and say, yeah, go on, let's save it, from the start. It's yeah, but yeah, again, a very nice case. And yeah, again, so that J-shaped lesion, it's not always going to be a root fracture. Obviously, if it's associated with that pocketing, then yeah, most likely. But yeah, you do probably need to do a bit of a examination first. So with your bioceramic sealers, you're only, like I've said, you're only aiming to inject it into the coronal third. If you've got, a microscope of high magnification, and if you're sort of comfortable going a little bit further into the canal, I'd say you're only really inject it as far as you're able to see into those canals. If you're not really using any magnification, then yeah, try not to get it too deep. You really want to be seeing what you're doing. So once you've injected it into the canal, it's your GP cone, which is acting as your downpack device and your spreader. So your GP is what's pushing that sealer, apically and laterally. So there's no really need to get your plugger, 5 mils from the apex. That's what your GP is doing. So what the GP is also in addition to sort of spreading that sealer into the canals, it's acting as the path for retreatment. So this is something which is actually very, very important, that once a bioceramic sealer is set, there are no solvents, no rotary files, nothing that can remove it from a canal. So if you are new to using them, and this is where your master cone is essential, you want to make sure that you're getting you're seating your GP, from the 1 mil from the radiographic apex, such that if it ever does need to be retreated, at least your GP cone can be removed. So if you're not quite confident with the obturation, possibly there's a ledge, or you're not quite sure what's going on, then I probably would say, as a general dentist, it probably is best to use your resin-based sealers. But I'd say on 90, 95, 99% of cases where you're happy and everything's gone well, even as a general dentist, I think it's probably it is a good option to use your bioceramic sealer, as long as everything has and is going well. So with any new material, it will take a long time to get used to. Even when I started using these, you will extrude some. It's likely not to cause many issues. Like I said, if it's just the sealer, and in particular, One-Fil is much more flowable than I think a lot of people realize initially. So there are other sealers available, and some of them can be quite viscous. When I initially started using the Endosequence, just the normal BC sealer, there were cases where when I took quite a long time, they actually can start to sort of thicken quite fast. So do have everything ready when you're using these sealers. This is really just for all obturations, not just bioceramic in particular, but yeah, your apical stop. So an apical constriction, your apical stop is very important to avoid extrusion. So on that case where I had injected the sealer into the canals and coated it, again, we've got no extrusion, and that's because I had a good apical stop. So what that sort of means is, so this is a palatal canal. I've gone up to a 3006 on this canal. So I'm trying to now push the 3006 GP cone past the apex, and it's not getting anywhere. So sometimes what I do is then I'll instead get a 3004 cone, and again, try and get it past the apex. And again, we've got a good stop over here. So I know that there's going to be very minimal extrusion. So what's really helped me to get this, very consistently. Also, yeah, and I know some people are probably thinking, oh, he's likely just blocked or ledged that canal, and that was the post stop. So obviously, it's not. We just have a good apical stop. Yes, we've got a bit of a sealer extrusion, but the GP is stopping at the apex. So how this sort of works is obviously you've got your apical foramen, and that's the widest part of the root canal, and then you've got your apical constriction anywhere between 0.5 to 1 mils from the apical foramen. So you're aiming really to stop your preparation at this apical constriction. And so what's really helped is these sort of new AI motors with the apex locator built into it. And it really has just made my life, a ton easier. My favorite feature in these is that where you can set your apex locator to anywhere between 0 and 2 millimeters from the apex. And so what I sometimes use, I often use sort of faster files. So I will set also these motors to have that apical slowdown. So what this sort of looks like is I will set it to about 0.5 mils from the 0 reading. So what that looks like is in cases like this. Oh, there's no sound. Okay, this doesn't really work without sound, but you'll see that as I'm getting towards the apex, we've got that file slowing down. So with that inbuilt apex locator, it's much more difficult to now just blast past the apex, which I definitely have done on many occasions. Okay, so this bit doesn't work without the sound, but you hear what you're meant to hear is the beeping of the apex locator as it's getting closer to the apex. So yeah, it's very, very, now it's much more difficult to lose that apical constriction and go past the apex. So in a case like this, again, where it's a retreatment, there's big lesions, there's going to be a lot of bacteria at those apical areas. You don't want to be, extruding any bacteria. It's very easy to get a flare up in that case. And so the video that I just took was from this case. So again, we've got good working length control. And again, this was frustratingly another one which didn't come to his follow-up. So I don't have a post-up. No, I don't have a follow-up just yet. But again, in cases like this, yeah, it does make a difference not extruding any bacteria in those areas.
Yeah.
So
just on that as well, how the small head helps access some of the more tricky canals.
Oh yeah, definitely.
A difference as well.
Yeah, I do a lot of 7s, and for some reason, people who need 7s done are the people who also can't open at all. Yeah. And so yeah, that small head has really made such a big difference. Yeah, for sure. So not all sealers can be heated. Like I said, the first generation of sealers could not be heated. So you do have to do your research and check that if you are using a bioceramic sealer, that it can be heated. And again, it doesn't mean that you're trying to get it, your plug of 5 mils from the apex. So at most, if you do need to do it, they really only recommend 5 mils from the orifice instead of 5 mils from the apex. And again, when you're able to inject that sealer into the canal, and it is hydrophilic, you don't really need your excessive tapered preps. And really, yeah, if when you've got these long curved canals, which sometimes you do get both, it really is incredibly easy now to fill canals with these type of sealers compared to trying to get your very, very thin pluggers into these areas. So this was another 5 canal lower molar. I thought I had a video for this. Actually, I didn't. But I think I have posted this case on the group. So actually this MB route all the way down here, that was 27 mils. And again, if you're trying to get a wave on gold, 27 mils, you're going to be doing quite excessive coronal preps on some of these canals. And again, if you're trying to get your resin-based sealer, by coating that GP cone into these apical areas, it's unlikely you're really getting much sealer into that canal at all, into those apical areas at all. So that bioceramic obturation in these type of canals, it really, really does make your life a lot easier. This was the 3.7 over here. The 6 was actually taken out before I could have a go. So again, where we've got an S-shaped curve, a laid curve on that distal, that bioceramic obturation is much, much easier compared to what we used to try and get done. And again, this was, I think, again, the one that I have posted. So on that sort of quite a S-curve, you're really not going to get your plugger anywhere near the apex on those mesials, and really you're the only way, well, for me, the only way to obturate these is the bioceramic materials. You're not going to be getting any sealer to the apex on these type of cases. So with these type of cases, anything a little bit skinnier, your irrigation becomes very, very important. Again, the reason that we would use these sort of wider tapered preps is, again, back then we were limited to the type of irrigation devices that we had. And again, these traditional metal syringes, the traditional metal irrigation needles, they weren't very flexible. So you could not just get them, same as your pluggers, you needed the wider preps to get your irrigant, into those canals. So this was actually a very, well, I found a very interesting study where, so what they looked at was the irrigant flow, and even on very wide apexes. So this was a 5506, incredibly big. The side vented needles, they only go 1 or 2 mils past the end of the needle. And I always had this sort of a notion in my head that I get my needle 2-3 mils into the orifice, and magically the hypochlorite's gone all the way to the apex and flushed everything out. And unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. So what this sort of slide is showing, that side vented is essential to reduce the risk of extrusion, and really that needle needs to be as close to the apex as possible. So the very, very easy way to get this done is Irriflex. Irriflex is probably my third favorite instrument that we have nowadays. First is my microscope, second is my AI motor, and third is Irriflex. So it just makes cleaning these areas incredibly easy. They do have these depth indicators, but I often use a rubber plugger just to see what I'm doing, and it's dual side vented as well. And you'll see that how it sort of curves there, it just makes things a lot easier. So on a curve like this, your metal needle is getting nowhere near the apex. And this doesn't have a lesion, but again, if it did, there's a very high bacterial load. You need to be getting your irrigant to the apex. So I just took a sort of this is actually a 25 mil, I think, metal needle. Video's not terribly in focus, but in that distal canal, we're getting, and all the canals, by the way, were about 24 mils. In the distal canal, we are getting about 22 mils, so that one wasn't too bad. Same in the palatal, about 23 mils into the canal on the palatal, but on that MB route with that sharp curve, I think we're only getting about 15 or 16 mils into that canal. And again, you're just getting all that debris which your file has made is just not getting removed. Whereas when you compare that to the Irriflex, that in the MB canal, you see the depth markings there. That top one is 22 mils. So my stopper is at 23 mils, and we're getting all the way to the apex. So we're delivering that irrigant to the apex, and on almost all cases, it will make a very big difference. And then that was the post up here. So yeah, with your metal needle, you're really only getting maybe it can bend. I did actually bend that needle a little bit, and you're really only getting maybe up to here. You're not getting very far. Without the Irriflex.
I think that's a beautiful. Just go back to the X-ray there. I mean, I do that a lot now with MB2s. I mean, it's like I don't really see the reason, especially if they join, why we should do a big massive prep, especially when we can get the fluid dynamics down the MB1 canal, out the MB2 canal. It's like we don't need to cut away all that tooth structure on the MB2 cases, but you need to probably have cone beam CT before you're kind of making those decisions as well. So if you don't have access to that, it's a little bit more difficult to have that decision making.
Yes, yeah, for sure. So for a tooth, I mean, definitely I would traditionally go in a bit higher. But yeah, as soon as I mean, I just put a ton of effort, and this was actually a dentist that I was doing. So I put a ton of effort into that MB1, and as soon as I found that the MB2 joined, I really didn't go that high. I think this was just a 1704 actually. So yeah, there was no real need to go any higher.
Did you feel a bit more pressure treating a dentist?
Yeah, he was actually he was great. He was quite good in that. Even I could tell on the first. So this was an irreversible pulpitis case. It was difficult. It was a hot pulp, difficult to anesthetize. But to be fair to him, he just lied there. He didn't. It could have been much worse if it was a regular patient, I think. But for sure, the pressure was on. As soon as we saw that pre-op, I was hoping. He thought it was a 17, so I was like, "Oh, that'll be fine." I said to him, "As long as it's not the 16, we're good." And then when I came to him and did the testing, it was a 16 that was the one. So we both weren't looking forward to it actually, but yeah, thankfully it all went well.
Right.
So you also get a bioceramic putty. There are again a few different companies that make these. The One-Fil is called the One-Fil PT. So these are sort of the what I use instead of the MTA. And to be honest, the biggest reason is that when it comes pre-mixed, it just makes life so much easier. And then again, they've sort of improved on MTA a little bit, where you get a bit of a faster set. But it's got all the good properties of a bioceramic material, where it's antibacterial, good biocompatibility. And again, with the bioceramics, there's no staining. So these can be used in anterior teeth without sort of concern for staining. So where I probably use these type of materials the most is in the large apices. Anything over 60, I will go with a putty. But again, it's got a number of applications, as you can see here. So again, just a few cases that I've used this on. So a retreat over here, this was a very wide apex. I think this was about 60 or maybe even a 70. So these new materials, they do flow quite well. Well, I wouldn't say flow, but they're much easier to handle. And again, you'll see we picked up a bit of a lateral canal just using the putty there. But again, your irrigant, and in particular EDTA, on these retreat cases is very important to remove that sort of a smear layer in order to actually get the materials into those areas. And again, this is one that I told to change the crown, but still hasn't listened to me. But thankfully, we've got good healing, and hopefully one day they will listen to me and change the crown. So this is again a pretty interesting case where we're retreating that 1/6. Radiographically, it's not a bad root canal, but again, that's just from the radiograph. There's very difficult to know what went on during the actual treatment. So when we took a CBCT, it's quite evident straight away that the MB2 was missed, which is just this area to the right of the MB1. And again, the lesion is very big, probably a bit bigger than seen on the radiograph. So for a case like this, you've got some resorption there on the palatal root. You'll see it's much going to be a very wide apex over here. So for a case like this, once all that GP was removed, we've gone in with the Bioceramic Putty, and we're sort of planning for the future here because it's very possible that this is going to need some surgical treatment later on. So the putty, it's just much easier to handle than MTA, I find. Quite easy to pack into these canals. So I've just got the small end of my plugger over here, getting into that distal. And I think the same with, so actually on this tooth, I filled up the whole canal right the way through with the Bioceramic Putty. I think this guy was 80, it's already a retreat. We're not going to be doing this again. If it ever fails, the tooth is coming out, so I'm not concerned on this case about potentially having to retreat it in the future. You can sometimes use these paper point. Paper points are, again, instead of your pluggers, they can be quite useful in packing these type of materials into the canals. And so then once this is done, I will just put a small layer of GP. And so that's when I'm cleaning the pulp chamber, all that putty is not getting washed away. It just makes things a little bit easier. So for on a case like this, he was diabetic, 80 years old, very high bacterial load in that area. If we do need to go in surgically, which to be honest, I think likely we will need to, it also makes things a lot easier where there's unless we've got that isthmus between the MB1 and MB2, there's going to be no retropep to do. We can just sort of cut off the roots, and yeah, it does make life a lot easier when you've got CBCT and these type of materials to plan these type of cases. So that's the post-op. We've got a bit of extrusion with that material, so it does sort of when you compact it, it can sort of flow, not obviously as well as a sealer, but a lot better than MTA. So again, just another case here with the and this was actually with the this was I think 12 or 13 years old. So you've got that the dens invaginatus over here, quite a big lesion. You see you've got that perforation buccally over here. So as soon as we've gone in, it's only a couple of millimeters, and we can see the perforation buccally. And again, a very wide canal. She's very young. Trying to get a resin, trying to get if you're doing any sort of vertical compaction, it's very, very easy to extrude in these cases, and this is where the putty does really come in hand. Again, I thought I had a video for this case, but I couldn't find it for the life of me. But we obturated with the Bioceramic Putty even into the perforation over here. And the orthodontist took a CBCT follow-up for me because I think they want to get braces on soon. So again, at my 6-month review, or at the 6-month review, it's almost all completely healed. Yes, we've got a bit of extrusion over here, but it's a very much easier to fill these type of big wide canals all the way through with these bioceramic tears, rather than trying to get GP in and your resin base. So yeah, I slept a lot happier knowing that there's bioceramic materials in this tooth. It does make things a lot easier. So we're almost done now. Just a little bit on sort of how endodontics has come. I'd say in the last possibly 10 years or so. So we're sort of moving towards these conservative access cavities. There's not a lot of research, but there is some to show that in conservative access cavities, there is better fracture resistance. And with the materials and the heat-treated files we have nowadays, we can be more conservative and achieve the same results. So again, and now this is actually a different 5-rooted lower molar that I was doing. And again, you do need magnification to see these type of cases, but we're going through a crown, we're trying to be conservative, and you can get very good results being conservative. So we're now sort of moving towards these smaller tapered preps, and a D16 of 1 millimeter is what sort of a lot of companies are aiming for, and I'll go through this in a second. And again, conserving that peri-cervical dentine. So what this all means is that pericervical dentine is anything which is 4 mils up and 6 mils under the CEJ. Quite often that 4 mils above the CEJ is sometimes out of our control with the caries and previous restorations. But what sort of definitely is in our control is that 6 millimeters underneath that CEJ. So when we look at, again more popular rotary files, what that D16 of 1 millimeter means is that on these very popular files, the Wave One Gold and the Pro Taper Next, 1 millimeter is about 11 mils from the tip on the Wave One Gold, and same as the Pro Taper Next. So what this sort of translates to is, if your canal is more than 18 millimeters, most of these files will be cutting much higher than 1 millimeter at your coronal orifice. So again, it's not really a hard and fast rule, but there are you're trying nowadays to be as conservative as possible, and there's a reason that the newest Pro Taper Ultimate, their finishing files all have a D16 of 1 millimeter. There is sort of some research to show that, you know, the more conservative you can be, you know, the higher the higher the fracture resistance. So the problem I've always had with Dentsply and the Pro Taper is that because they are all variable tapered, it does mean that you need to really have their paper points and their GP cones, which are about 3 or 4 times more expensive than the standard tapered ones. But we are nowadays trying to be as conservative as possible. And again, with that 4% constant taper, you've got very good apical shapes, or very, you know, a good apical diameter, being as conservative as possible, keeping that coronal orifice under 1 millimeter. Has been shown to, you know, provide some fracture resistance. So the heat-treated rotary files and your integrated apex locator, these two are just have made my life, you know, a lot easier. So the heat-treated rotary files, they're just very easy to pre-curve. So we're trying to get into the mesial lingual canal over here. Conservative access again, and with the small head on these AI motors, it really does make my life a lot easier. I think again, there's probably not going to be any sound with this, but again, what it's showing is, yeah, it just makes my life a lot easier trying to fill or trying to shape these difficult to reach canals, where again the patient just refuses to open. So a big reason why these integrated apex locators do make such a big difference is there have been studies to show that when you take your apex locator reading, as definitely I used to do very early on, so you've just gone in with a 6 or 10 file, you get your reading, and then once you've done your shaping, I think these were all shaped with Wave One Gold. Once you've done your shaping, you'll see at the bottom there that the working length does reduce. In this case, it was by about 1.5 millimeters, and I think on average they found by about 1 millimeter. So if you are taking your working length a little bit too early, it is advisable to take it, you know, during preparation and after preparation as well. You will find definitely that it will change even by 0.5 millimeter. If you're constantly going past the apex 0.5 millimeter every single time, you are going to get some post-op pain. So that's where these integrated apex locators do help quite a lot in keeping your preparation within the canal. Again, keeping the apical constriction, not extruding any irrigants or bacteria. Irriflex, which I've already gone through, really is quite essential to these type of treatments. And then again, your bioceramic sealers. So all these, you know, in the last few years, I'd say it's created a sort of I wouldn't really possibly an ecosystem where it just really has made life a lot easier to what I would imagine, you know, these difficult cases, trying to treat some of these curves without these heat-treated files and the Irriflex and the sealer. Definitely would have been a lot easier, you know, 15, 20 years ago. So yeah, it really has made my life a lot easier now. So yeah, I think we are all finished. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming to you. If you want to discuss any cases, I'm always happy to do so. WhatsApp's probably the best way to contact me, and if you have any questions, yeah, please let me know.
Amazing, Jay. Thank you so much for that. That was a really,
Thanks a
really,
lot. Thanks,
really
Daniel.
excellent presentation. It's like you've got some amazing cases, and I love the way you present it all so modestly. But it's like the standard of work is phenomenal. I think
Thank you. No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I think we just open it up. Is there any particular questions anyone has? You can unmute, or you can just type the question into the chat box. If there's no immediate questions now, we can you can just email them to us later on as well, and we'll be able to answer them either on the page, or it's we can answer you directly as well. But I think one of the biggest questions that I tend to get on it is people worried about extrusions. And even today we got one of the dentists who's done some amazing cases. He's like just worried about some of the extrusion he's had on a tooth with big areas and the mesobuccal and palatal. I'll try and post it anonymously later on tonight as well. But I think he's worried. Okay, what's the likely outcome in those cases?
So again, like I said, but yeah, if it's just the sealer which is extruding, that should not cause an issue. One of the first cases that you posted with that excessive extrusion, yeah, it's just the sealer. So if you've got good working control, you've got good tug back on your GP, and if you're not constantly pushing that debris and bacteria past the apex, if you are just extruding just a bioceramic sealer, yeah, I'm not too worried. I wouldn't say my extrusion rate is 50%, but I definitely do extrude on a number of cases, and you'll see that I'm not ever aiming to extrude, because when you do that, you are likely to quite often over extrude, and so yeah, and you're not ever sort of aiming to get all that sealer past the apex. But in certain cases, like you said, like I said, on retreatments and those lateral canals, that little bit of extrusion, for me, it doesn't make a difference, as long as you've kept your preparation within that canal, and you're not pushing all the bacteria past the apex either.
Absolutely. I think it's respecting where your working length, and it's and not, I think that's really important, the point you made there as well about how the working length can change over time. I think that's not something that's taught really well, at least to us when we were undergrads, but it's it can absolutely change massively during the course of treatment, just depending on how much dentin you remove in the perisapital region as well. So the more conservative you are, the less it'll change. But if you're using kind of bigger tapered files, the bigger the taper, the more the working length will change over the course of the treatment.
Yes, yeah.
Which becomes a lot more. So just a question here, currently used biodentine for vital pulpotomies. There's so much waste with this. Can I use the One-Fil Putty for all the indications of biodentine?
So I think yes. I mean, again, it's going to take you time. Biodentine is one that is mixed. I have not used biodentine, but I think it is mixed, like a sort of GIC, and it comes in a
capsule.
Yes, yeah. So where it is pre-mixed, and you can sort of inject it into the areas if you're able to reach those areas. It probably is then a little bit easier to handle, but the putty or any bioceramic putty will take time to get used to. You can probably start using. You probably need to use a. So I just in the videos I used the bioceramic putty where I placed it with the my plugger. But you'll likely need to use one of those MTA carriers instead. But yes, the bioceramic putties can all be used. So biodentine is a bioceramic. I think it's a calcium phosphate based. Yeah, so it's very similar, and it's got all the same properties as it is a bioceramic. So the bioceramic putties are just sort of different consistency. They're pre-mixed. So yeah, they can all be used for the same indications.
Yeah, I think just someone else is the setting time of biodentine is 12 minutes. So it's for And sometimes even clinically, it feels it takes longer than 12 minutes as well. So I think it's a huge advantage with that new putty that you can just put a little piece of moist gauze over it, or you just literally put water over it, and in 3 minutes you get that initial set where it just begins to harden. For me, for surgery, that makes a huge difference, because I've had problems with other kind of putties when I've come back in later. If you don't have that initial set and it gets contaminated with blood, they tend not to set very well at all. So for me now, it's really important to, before I finish surgically, I wait for that initial set to occur, and I'll tidy it up a little bit before I actually initiate bleeding and actually stitch it up. So I think that
Yes, yeah. So I don't know why, but I thought I had that video where I was showing you the putty, and seems I had missed it out to edit it in, but I just put a moist gauze, a moist pellet into the pulp changer. I left it there for a few minutes, and that just helps the initial set, and then I put my GP on top, so the fast set, trying to sometimes waiting even 3 minutes, it feels like an eternity.
Absolutely.
So anything sorry, so my voice is going. So anything anything over 3 minutes feels like a very, very long time.
No, well done. Have some water. You did amazing there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We've done a recording of it, so we'll make that available to everybody. We'll send it out as a newsletter. No, thank you again. Your email address is there for anybody who wants to contact you directly, or you can message us via the group as well. So have you any plans to come back to the UK, or what's your...
Yeah, one day I'll be back. But I've got it quite good here. As you saw in those initial photos, New Zealand is it's amazing. It's just it's a great country. But yeah, it's a little bit too far from home. So yeah, one day I will be back.
Amazing. Jay, thank you so much for a really, really entertaining presentation. I really enjoyed it.
No, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Bye. Okay, guys, thank you very much for joining us all. You can message me any questions, and we will chat to you soon. Bye.